All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Today, me and Rowdy here are going to be breaking down the Miami Hurricanes, our 2022 preview and prediction. Rowdy, it's been a minute, man. I'm glad that you're back on the pod.
Man, I'm glad to be back, especially talking the Hurricanes. I specialize in these guys, so, let's get into this pod. I'm really looking forward to what Mario Cristobal is doing in the offseason. And, as we speak, they've got a Legends camp going on, their new twist on the Paradise camp. And they've got quite a few guys for that. They've got a few 5-stars there. Jaden Rashad is on campus. But, I'm looking forward to the season, as a matter of fact, because they've got a lot to work with, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do.
And that's what we'll start with this new look coaching staff. It was a pretty interesting offseason because they weren't sure if they were going to make a fire or make a change, but they go ahead and hire Mario Cristobal. He was pretty adamant about not taking this job, but he does in the end. 35-12 record in 4 years at Oregon. He also recruited very well. The state of California pretty much belonged to him. So USC, they get Lincoln Riley, and they also have Cristobal go out of the conference. What an offseason for them, because this guy, he's a heck of a recruiter. 2 Pac-12 titles in his tenure. But I think more importantly, the supporting staff he's got here. I'm very shocked that Josh Gaddis took this job, 3 years at Michigan. Just won the Broyles Award last year. Usually that winner would take a head coaching job. I'm not really sure what the case was and why he left Michigan. Harbaugh flirting with the NFL certainly threw something aboard, and he shockingly leaves here for Miami to take the same position as the offensive play caller. That's big news. And they also got Kevin Steele coming back. He was, out of football last year. It's going to be his first season as the defensive play caller, but, he's been with Tennessee, Auburn, LSU, Bama. He hasn't coached in the ACC since he was at Clemson in 2011, but a variety of different stops for Kevin Steele. From top to bottom, I love this staff.
Yeah, that's one thing Miami has really done. You pretty much touched on all of it, but Miami's done everything to adjusting the athletic department, to revamping the coaching staff, and even the strength department. They brought home Kevin Feld, who was with Mario Cristobal at Oregon, and you saw what they did. They had multiple top offensive lines in the conference, and that's going to be an emphasis with Alex Mirabal, who also came from Oregon and has a long-lasting relationship with Mario Cristobal. And I would not be surprised if we see Miami's the biggest change, from last year or recent years to this year would be the offensive line, because of the emphasis that they've put on it. I can't remember the exact quote, but Alex Mirabal practically, gave a very pictureful quote about if offensive line is a problem at Miami, then something's going to be going wrong. But practically saying that offensive line will not be an issue at Miami because that is their point of emphasis. And you see that with what they did at Oregon and even FIU. When FIU and Mario Cristobal was at FIU, they put an emphasis on the offensive line. Alex Mirabal at Marshall, they put an emphasis on the offensive line. So I would not be surprised to see how the run game now pans out, because Miami struggled on the ground in recent years.
Yeah, and that's going to get us started here with the offense. We'll get the Alex Mirabal in that offensive line here in a couple minutes, but they get back 7 total starters. Derek King, the experiment, didn't exactly pan out. It did lead to the emergence of Tyler Van Dyke. He's really just scratching the surface, I think. He saved the season last year, I'd say. Showcased great touch, nice velocity, and he's a former pitcher, so that's certainly some evident traits that he will possess. Big plays were not hard to find with him at the helm. 2,900 yards, 25-6 TD to INT ratio. This passing game certainly took a big step forward with him under center. And PFF even had him ranked as the 10th best quarterback entering this season. And some people have him as a first-round projection for next year. What are your expectations for Tyler Van Dyke this season, following a pretty unexpected season last year?
Well, I'm sure you know this, but Tyler Van Dyke was one of 2 quarterbacks in the college football playoff era to complete the season with 6 games for 300 yards passing and 3 touchdowns in each of those games. The only other one was the number 1 pick in the 2020 draft, Joe Burrow. So Tyler Van Dyke has, I think, practically all the tools to have success at Miami and lead them to have not a national championship year, but bring them to have prominence in the ACC and start them on a trend for that. And not only that, but compete for the Coastal Division, which is what is expected year in, year out at Miami, but has not happened. And to touch on the running backs, they've got quite a bit of depth there. I think, Don Chaney Jr. is one of the more injury-prone guys on the roster, on the running back room. But Jalen Knighton has always been a solid second and 1-2 punch with Don Chaney. And they add Henry Parrish from Ole Miss, who is kind of a compliment to Jalen Knighton, and Trevante Citizen from the high school ranks, top 247 talent. And Thad Franklin, who kind of had a pretty solid end to the last year, is they were starting to rotate more backs into the system, and he found success there. And he's a thumper; he'll run right through one. And I think that there's a lot of weapons that Tyler Van Dyke also, not even touching on the receivers yet, can use, especially with the rotational aspect that Gaddis is going to emphasize with this offense.
Yeah, it's a strong group of backs. They're pretty banged up last year. Only one guy had double-figure games. That was Cody Brown, but Jalen Knight, like you said, 561 yards, 8 touchdowns. He's a dual threat out of the backfield. And Henry Parrish, he should play a good bit. He follows running back coach Kevin Smith over from Ole Miss. Very speedy. Got him on the edge a lot, but he could slash on the inside as well. I was very happy with what Parrish did for them. They had 4 different guys that I think averaged 10-plus carries per game. Ole Miss, fast-paced offense. They got a lot of different guys involved. So I think this is a good fit here. He's certainly going to play a prominent role. Like you said, Chaney struggled with health. They also got Thad Franklin as well. But Cristobal, he's going to want to pound the rock with this group, and I think he certainly got the backs capable of doing so. Looking at the receiving group, though, the roster is mainly mixed with vets and young guys, but not a wide receiver. I think it's really a young group here. Frank Ladson, though, he's one of the more veterans. He's a Clemson transfer. Miami's had some good transfer wide receivers over the last few seasons. They get another one here in Ladson, who was a big-time vertical threat. They lose the top 2 pass catchers from a season ago. But I like Keyshawn Smith. He's got elite speed, thrives with screens around those deep patterns. He needs to develop that route tree a bit. But from a raw prospect standpoint, I think Smith is certainly going to be the guy that emerges as a leader here. Tight end Will Mallory, 6'5", 245, 347 yards on 30 grabs last season. He's a guy that a lot of people are excited for. And Tyler Van Dyke's roommate, Xavier Restrepo, likely to start in the slot. I like what they got here. How do you feel about the depth, though? Because that's kind of an issue for me. But I think from a starter standpoint, I think they're pretty set.
Yeah, I think from a starter standpoint, that is correct. I think Jacoby George, believe it or not, will probably be the starting outside receiver alongside Keyshawn Smith. Frank Ladson is just kind of, not necessarily struggled, but he's not really, it hasn't completely clicked for him yet. And the guys that are already on the roster have had good springs, and they're going to more than likely have, they're having good fall practices. So they're going to, I think the young guys are probably you're going to see more of the young guys than you might see of the vets this year. And I think that they're going to rotate a lot of these guys, try and get some guys playing time. Miami just signed another big time vertical threat, Colby Young from the JUCO ranks, a 6'4", 220 kid who allegedly runs around a 4'4", 4'5" range. And I wrote this in an article previewing the receiver room, but in his first 2 highlights of his tape, he's practically just jumping up on 50-50 balls, underthrown ones, and mossing the entire practically 2 or 1 defender. And it's impressive. And he was a late signing for Miami, and he'll more than likely have reps because they don't have the size. Miami's struggled to have the size. That's why you get guys like Frank Ladson, Isaiah Horton, who's a freshman, and Colby Young. They're all about 6'3" and up. And Miami hasn't necessarily had that. They had Charleston Rambo, who's about 6'1", and he could go up and get a ball. But they need the size. And you said Restrepo, he's a guy that they love out of the slot. Brashard Smith is another guy that they're going to like to use out of the slot. And I think both of those guys, more so Brashard Smith, will be used in jet sweeps. But we're definitely going to see motions and a lot of wrinkles in the Miami offense, especially with the spread being an emphasis. But also I do want to say, don't be surprised if Miami does put an emphasis on running the ball. Like you said, Gaddis comes from Michigan. Michigan's kind of a 50. They like to run the ball more than they do pass, at least, in my personal opinion. This past year, they did a really good job of balancing the 2 out. But we're still going to see an emphasis on the run game because, like I said, it's lacked in recent years. And a Mario Cristobal team and even a Josh Gaddis coach team are going to run the ball. So we'll probably see a nice 50-50 split, maybe a 55-45 split on run to pass. So Tyler Van Dyke may have to adjust to that, but they're not going to be changing a I formation or shotgun. They're going to be mostly running out of the shotgun and pistol sets.
There will be plenty of wrinkles, plenty of creativity with this offense, but none of that matters if this offensive line doesn't step up. The return of Zion Nelson's huge because this unit wasn't exactly great a year ago. And I think the biggest reason he returns is because of working with Cristobal and Alex Mirabal that you alluded to earlier. His athletic ability allows him to climb. I like his footwork. That allows him to shine in pass protection. And, I think he's certainly going to reach that second-level first-round potential with this group of coaches. Very excited for his season. Jakari Clark, plenty of experience at center. Jalen Rivers. He's impactful inside, only played a handful of games last year. They also brought in 2 transfers from Oregon, though, Jonathan Dennis, Logan Sagapolu, and then Michael McLaughlin. He's a mover that should fit in zone schemes here at right tackle. Is that going to be the starting lineup, or how are you feeling about this offensive line that could certainly go with a few different options here?
Well, I believe it or not, I actually spoke with Lawrence Seymour on Twitter Spaces a few days ago, and Lawrence was, talking that there's definite competition on the offensive line. It made it seem as if, there's not a lot of pieces set yet. He is in competition for the center spot with Ja'Kai Clark, who you said, and Ja'Kai Clark is a pretty solid guy. He's gotten a lot of reps over his Miami career. Zion Nelson's definitely got the left tackle spot locked up. Jalen Rivers, he'll more than likely get his tackle spot locked up at right. I think Michael McLaughlin's a guy that they're he's still filling out his frame. I mean, this is a guy that was arguably better in basketball than he was in football because of his frame. I mean, he was just a very good-sized big man in basketball and kind of slimmer on the tackle side in football. But he's filled out in his frame quite well, and I think he's a guy that will definitely be a rotational guy. You said Logan Sagapolu. He was a guy that before he got injured was in contention to be a starter at Oregon. Jonathan Dennis, South Dade kid, made his way all the way out to Oregon, transfers back home. He's probably going to be a rotational guy. All in all, I like the depth that Miami has and the coaching that Miami has on the offensive line. I said it earlier, but it's very impressive considering what they have had in recent years. I mean, DJ Scaife, another guy that is going to find a way to get on the roster or get a roster spot on the offensive line. And they can put a lot of guys in a lot of different places, and that's what I learned talking with Seymour was they have been kind of experimenting with a lot of different things, and that's because Mirabal and Cristobal are offensive line focused men, so they're practically with the offensive line the entire time. All in all, like I said, I like what they have there at offensive line because it's practically just almost night and day from what it was last year.
Yeah, I'm very excited for the offense. I think they'll make some big strides this year. Very excited to see how guys like Nelson and Tyler Van Dyke perform this year. But looking at this defense, they allowed over 28 points per game a season ago. The pass rush group was underwhelming in 2021. Of course, they had some big shoes to fill, but they only had 33 sacks. It's a pretty quality group altogether, though, I'd say. Mitchell Agudi, strong hands, quick feet, relentless pursuit. He comes over from UCLA. Jafari Harvey, he's an impressive raw prospect. He's been uninspiring the first 2 years. I expected more from him last season, but they're going to certainly give him a good go here. This new coaching staff, I think, will certainly help him out. Chance Williams, he's kind of in the same boat. Been pretty underwhelming, but he's 6'4", 255, got plenty of length. Then you look at the interior, though. Leonard Taylor, a former 5-star, 9.5 tackles for loss. He's got superstar potential. They also had Akeem Mesidor from West Virginia. He's been a very good interior pass rusher for the Mountaineers. Jacob Lichtenstein, a USC transfer. And then another one here, a 4-year vet from UAB, Antonio Moultrie. They also picked up Cyrus Moss and Nigel Kelly, 2 top-end freshmen that will potentially come off the edge this fall. How do you feel about this defensive line as a whole?
Well, I mean, they absolutely attacked defensive line in the portal. As you practically, just named off everyone that they got, they wanted to revamp that. It's clear that they did not like what they had, when they first got here, and that it's not that they didn't like it, it's that they felt like it needed more improvement, of course, and depth. That was without a doubt as the defensive line. You practically have said, they've been. You touched on Jafari Harvey, but defensive line's really just been uninspiring over the past few years, which is, in contrast to 2017 and 2018 when their defense was their strong suit. And arguably last year, which is quite crazy considering offense became the ones that were winning them games because their defense could not get stops. Third downs were pitiful. And I think what Cristobal did here is brought in a ton of kids with experience to add depth and to add competition to the defensive line. And they signed a few freshmen, a few guys that I'm looking forward to seeing. Nigel Kelly on the edge, Cyrus Moss, all the way from Bishop Gorman. They've got a pretty good pipeline from there. And those are 2 guys that Cyrus Moss is definitely on the lankier side, kind of could be a Greg Rousseau type, if I may, with the frame at this point in his young Miami career. And then Nigel Kelly is definitely got the frame and going to put on a little bit more weight. And I seriously like what Miami has on the defensive line. Jacob Lichtenstein, he's probably going to be a big rotational guy alongside Akeem Mesidor, if not start. And Leonard Taylor, he's still a guy that it's still yet to click for. And that's wild that I say that. You listed his stats for last year. But Leonard Taylor is definitely going to have an impact on the defensive line.
Yeah, this run defense certainly got a lot better, much better than they were in 2020. Seemed to get better as the game went on. That's what I think was the biggest part. They just start off a little soft, and I think they heated up throughout the remaining three quarters. 139 yards per game, there's still a number they want to improve on. I think they will, because remember, they almost gave up 600 rushing yards in 2020 to North Carolina. That was pretty much rock bottom for this program, it seemed, where they couldn't tackle a horse.
Mm-hmm.
They just could not do anything.
Right.
I think that's certainly a focal point here. Kevin Steele, he's going to want to get more physicality out of this defense. Cristobal, he won't stand for it either in the trenches. That leads us to the linebacker, though. It's probably the weakest part of this team, but they did add another vet from UCLA and Caleb Johnson. Corey Flagg. Ceiling doesn't seem to be that high, but this is his third season. 60 stops, 7 tackles for loss a year ago. Not exactly a great athlete, but he was a producer, so that's something. Deshaun Troutman, Austin Cave, they transfer out. But Gilbert Fryerson, he's been around a long time. He's a versatile player. What do you think his role will be this season?
I see Fryerson in what is now known as the star role for Miami. I think that he'll have his impact kind of as an in the box safety, just like he typically has at Miami. That's where they've used him. He's kind of a hybrid guy. He doesn't play in the secondary. He's used primarily as a linebacker now, but they'll put him in coverage on in terms of receivers and running backs out of the backfield, because he can keep up with those guys more so than a guy like Corey Flagg or Wayman Steed. I like what they brought in Caleb Johnson. I like what I saw on the tape in terms of his ability at UCLA. I like the UCLA transfer pipeline that they're kind of building there. They got Jalen Phillips a few years ago, who turned into be a first-round draft pick. Not saying Caleb Johnson's going to turn into be a first-round draft pick, nor the same for Mitchell Agood, but they both have pretty good high potential, and they add solid depth to the Miami room that has certainly been lacking. And another guy that I think could really emerge this year is Chase Smith. He's got a really good frame, and he carries that weight very well. He will definitely get rotational roles. Wesley Besaint, freshman, he was a highly touted linebacker coming out of Central, and I think he is definitely going to push for I wouldn't say starting time, but he'll definitely rotate in. He's been injured. I believe he had an injury in spring camp, so he hasn't been too involved. But yeah, the linebacker room it's still arguably the weakest position on the roster, but they've got Charlie Strong there to try and shore that up, and I think they can make improvements and strides from last year, especially from guys who may not have been the best in space. Corey Flagg, he struggled with tackling the most, arguably, but Wayman Steed is a guy that's probably going to look to leave this role. I actually spoke with him on Twitter Space about a few months ago, and he was really taking in the leadership role with this roster.
That leads us to the secondary. It's got a lot of exciting potential. They struggled immensely, though. 102nd pass defense. Tyreek Stevenson, phenomenal in coverage. The UGA transfer came over, and he was left on an island quite a bit. And he delivered, I think, on his side of the ball for the most part. Interesting battle at safety, though. You got James Williams. Very excited for him. He was one of those young players that brought energy late in the season. He had 31 tackles, 2 picks. And Avonte Williams, a hard hitter who saw significant action in the final 4 games. All 18 of his tackles came in the month of November. Cameron Kitchens, though, he stepped up as a true freshman. These guys, I'm not sure what they're going to do, but they really got some potential here at safety. How do you feel about this back end? They got some exciting players to work with, I'd say. That includes Darryl Porter, West Virginia transfer, and DJ Ivey, who's been around quite a bit.
Well, here's the thing. With the safeties alone, when those guys leave, it's going to leave big shoes to fill at the University of Miami, because I think James Williams did a lot more than he was supposed to in his freshman year last year. He was thrown into the fire. Avonte Williams, a guy that was injured his first year, made appearances last year and flashed. Cam Kinchins, I mean, all of these guys are practically on the same class, playing field, especially with, the COVID year. All these guys are practically in the same class. And then they moved Al Blades from corner to safety to bolster that room. And they have a few talented guys. Brian Balum, who's yet to get a whole lot of playing time, but he's been a guy on special teams that's been pretty significant. Keyshawn Washington, guy that's kind of slimmer, but he's got a good frame, but he's still got to gain weight. Got the good height, just has to put on a little bit more weight, as he's definitely a little bit more on the slimmer side. But on the corner, I like what they brought in Daryl Porter. I think that was another good call, getting a guy that was also from the Miami area. I believe he's from Fort Lauderdale, and bring him back home. Kind of a guy that Manny Diaz missed on. I wouldn't even say missed on, never really even made an effort to go after. And I think Cristobal corrected a lot of these errors, I would say, by bringing in the talent and guys that were originally from the area and that were never brought back home, because they ended up having success at their schools that they went to, and that's one thing that they brought back home in Porter. Tyreek Stevenson, he'll be a guy that's definitely going to be draft eligible. He is draft eligible, and he'll be a guy that's probably going to be a good high round pick next year. And DJ Ivey, we'll see what happens we'll see what we get from him this year, because he's kind of been one of the more inconsistent corners. But if you look at a picture of DJ Ivey, I don't know if you'll see a more freakishly looking corner in the country than him. I mean, he looks like he could play a linebacker position. I mean, he's just that chiseled. Marcus Clark's a guy that can get in a lot more. He made quite an impact a little bit last year. Isaiah Dunson, same thing with him. Both of those guys can come in and provide solid reps in relief of Porter, Stevenson, Ivey, so on.
They also get Lou Headley back at punter. That's going to be a heck of a weapon. But yeah, this defense last year, they weren't great. They had a 3-game winning streak at the end of October, early November, where they beat NC State, Pittsburgh, and Georgia Tech. But they outscore those opponents. They gave up 30-plus in those games. They're lucky to win them, but they were getting flamed in the secondary by Devin Leary and Kenny Pickett, two of the top quarterbacks in the conference. So they certainly have a lot to work on. They only get 5 starters back, but Manny Diaz, the defensive guru, supposedly was not able to really get things done here in the long term with Miami. The turnover chain is also retired, so obviously Cristobal means business this year. I think there's a lot of potential at all 3 levels of the field. Very excited for the defensive line, though, and guys like Tyreek Stevenson, James Williams. I want to see how they perform this fall. Overall, I think this is a pretty solid unit. Kind of like the offense. I don't think there's a way they can regress, but certainly possible. I think both sides will progress, and that leads us to the schedule preview and the prediction. Non-conference, they don't get much the first 2 weeks, but they do get Texas A&M week 3 at Kyle Field. That's certainly a tough matchup, especially in the trenches. You have Miami winning that game. I don't. What are you feeling that makes you pick them over the Aggies here in week 3?
Well, I'm kind of curious to see how Haynes King does. I think Miami has the edge in the skill position. Maybe not offensive line, but they did lose a few pieces on that front. But on the defensive side, they have, quite frankly, do I even need to say it? I mean, they have just loaded that line. They've loaded their defense. It's got a lot of talent. And I think in this year, at least for Miami, I truly believe, like I said earlier, that the offense will kind of be the strong suit this year. And I think Miami's offense, I think they can truly overpower the A&M defense, but the game's going to be won and lost in the trenches. If Miami's offensive line doesn't come out and perform the way that they're supposed to against, an SEC opponent, because Miami does not have a good record against SEC opponents in the last few years. LSU in 2018, L. Alabama last year was an L. And then they don't want to start off the year with a loss to Texas A&M, an SEC school. They just wouldn't want to, because they get 2 good wins. We were both projecting 2 wins against Bethune-Cookman and Southern Miss, which are 2 very good tune-up games to get them prepped for A&M. And then after that, they've got Middle Tennessee. But I like what I like the Miami offense this year. They don't lose too many. They lost Mike Harley, Charleston Rambo, but like I said, I think that they've got enough weapons in the wide receiver room to make up for it. And with the right coaching under Josh Gaddis, I have no reason to believe that I don't see a lot of. I see more of Miami having the offensive advantage in the game, and that's where I really see them having a win over A&M. What gives you the A&M the edge over UM?
I think mainly in the secondary, that's going to be their biggest opportunity, like you're saying, on offense. I just think that A&M has the personnel. You look at Antonio Johnson, Tyreek Chappell, you guys like Damani Richardson, it's a veteran secondary, and the young guys really stepped up last year in all levels. I think they had 7 first-team SEC freshmen from a year ago, and that's both sides of the ball. I think this offensive line, they are big and nasty. I think more so for 2023, that's going to be a phenomenal unit. But 2022 in the short term, Bryce Foster, Layden Robinson, some of those guys on the interior, big, nasty. They were great last year, and they're only going to get better. And you said Haynes King might be the starter. I think it'll probably be Max Johnson, fresh face that comes over from LSU that performed very well last year. They also have Devon Achane. This guy's a nasty back. They got the offensive line for him to run behind. Again, I just complimented the Miami D-line, but I think they might be a little outmatched here.
Mm-hmm.
They certainly have a great opportunity, but I think especially at Kyle Field, it's going to be tough for Miami to win. I don't think that right now, at this moment in time, they exactly have the talent to beat A&M. I wouldn't say they're lacking too much, but A&M clearly has that advantage, especially in the secondary, and they're going to be in a lot of third and long situations. I don't think they're really going to be able to run the ball too well on the road because, they got some exciting backs, but that's still an area week 3. Can we bank on them being much improved that early? I'm not sure. So I think they're going to have to win the game through the air. They certainly got the players and the quarterback to get it done, but I think the secondary, they're going to win more often than not. The pass rush is kind of an issue for A&M. I'm not sure where they'll get a lot of pass rush from this year, but still, they're going to be in those third and long opportunities in Kyle Field to make some noise happen. I think that's where the difference is.
I think it's a good first test for Mario Cristobal. It's pretty good. It doesn't throw him right into it, if week 1. But I still think, not that it wouldn't matter. I think Cristobal is a guy that can do that. But I really believe that it'll be a really good first test to see where Miami is also at in terms of just the team scale and see where they at in terms of handling a strong SEC opponent, because A&M's no pushover. I may have made it sound like that they're going to be a pushover, but that's absolutely not the case. A&M is going to give Miami fits in a lot of different ways. Jimbo Fisher is known for giving Miami the Miami Hurricanes a lot of fits. So it'll be a good first test for Cristobal and kind of a nice, maybe we can see if that kind of this. I want to see if this game might be a little reminiscent of a Miami-Florida State game. Yeah, I didn't really think about that, but I want to see if it could be like that.
Regardless of what happens on September 17th, I think we're both in agreement to win the next 7. I think North Carolina and Florida State, those games will be fun. Maybe at Virginia, that offense will give some tests, but I think regardless, they win 7 in a row. We both have them losing to Clemson on the road and Pittsburgh at home over the final 2 contests. Clemson, this is a team that is trying to bounce back after a sluggish showing last year. Late November, I think that defense is going to be rocking. It's going to be very hard on the road to get something going. And against Pittsburgh, this is a team that a lot of people are counting out because they lose Heisman finalists. They lost Jordan Addison, but they return a lot of starters on both sides. The veteran offensive line. This defense gets a lot of talent back, especially in the front 7, that defensive line. If you haven't watched them play yet, watch them play. Look at their numbers from last year. They're phenomenal. And then more importantly, I think Pittsburgh last year, their secondary was terrible. That's something you don't expect from a Pat Narduzzi defense. I think they're certainly going to get things going on that side of the ball. And, that's kind of why they lost last year to Miami at home, because their secondary couldn't stop a soul in that game. That's really where they got exposed. They played games where quarterbacks were just overshooting receivers. They got bailed out by inaccurate balls most of the time. But I think the secondary is going to make some big strides, and that's going to be the difference maker. Of course, it's the final week of the year, so it's going to be hard to predict. But from right here, right now, late June, I think that's kind of the expectation, and that's what I'm going to go with.
Yeah, I think Miami has the potential to get a 10-2 record. I truly do, and I know that sounds maybe a little far-fetched, but you have them at 9-3 with the loss to A&M, which would be more than likely a quality loss considering or expecting they don't, get blown out. But I think it's the year 1 under the Mario Cristobal era. I think it's fair to say that Miami might be more talented than the majority of the teams on their schedule other than A&M and Clemson. even Pitt for that matter. But there's always that one chance, that a team just is ready to play, and Pitt has been ready to play against Miami numerous times at the end of the year. They're typically an end of the year opponent, and I think that they can catch them slipping. Clemson, year one under Mario Cristobal, Clemson has a struggling year last year. They're Clemson. It's very hard to count out Dabo Swinney and that team, as they love to practically have the target on their back. And I think they get them there. But if Miami, assuming no other team has a 6-2 record in the Coastal, and assuming Clemson does the same thing in the Atlantic, we could see Miami versus Clemson Part 2 in the ACC championship.
Yeah, I think, all in all, not sure if this is truly a 9 to 10 win team. The schedule's quite favorable, some nice draws with who they got at home. But I think there's a new energy in the building. The coaching staff is great. A lot of young talent, some really good impact transfers as well. Some really good individual players like Nelson and Stevenson that will continue to grow. Miami has won 4 straight over Pitt, though, so it's tough to pick them there. But I think it'll be a close one to decide the division. The vets on their roster for Pitt, they will get it done. That's another reason I have them winning that game. But I do think that will be the game that decides the division and the trip to Charlotte. What's your final prediction and your final thoughts on this football team?
I think I'm gonna go 10-2, and then 6-2 in the ACC. I do believe that they get a win over A&M, and they can drop the last 2 of the year. But I like what Miami has, all in all. I've spoken with a few of the players, and I've heard from multiple people that have been around the program over the spring and summer, that it's just entirely different, night and day from last year. Players as well, it's the details, the minor things, and they're saying it's night and day. It's really not comparable to the last administration. And they bring in Dan Radakovich, an athletic director, and he's really trying to change a lot of things, not only just in football but in all of athletics. So I really think that the Miami Hurricanes athletics is just practically revamped, and I think it's definitely, football will be the first teaser of what Miami athletics can do under a new administration and new funding, because the football team has been well funded this year, especially with NIL. They have that been going their way. There's a lot of reason, if you're a Miami fan, to be optimistic for the team going forward, because there's this has not been seen by Miami, the spending, the staff changing in well over 2 decades, really.
Mario Cristobal did go 9-4 in his first season at Oregon and Cyrus. That was a completely different situation, but nonetheless, it's clear that you can get big things done in your first season, especially when you look at the roster and the schedule they have. That's going to be it for today's episode, guys. Rowdy, thank you for joining me. It's been a while. I'm glad you're back.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, man.
And I will do this again closer to the season for our ACC predictions. Maybe my record will change for the better or the worse, but we'll see what happens so far. This is our preview and prediction for Miami. Thank you guys for listening. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.